Fuel protests are spreading across Africa as the crisis deepens. Sharp rises in petrol and diesel prices have triggered violent clashes in Kenya and the Comoros and strikes in Mozambique. Governments are scrambling to respond. In Kenya, a more than 23% increase in diesel prices last week sparked nationwide outrage and widespread protests. DW's Felix Maringa reports from Nairobi.
The rising cost of living has brought Kenyans back onto the streets. This time, strikes and protests over the price of fuel in the country. Demonstrators burnt tires and blocked roads, calling on the government to cut their costs. The protest turned deadly as police responded with force, leaving 4 people dead and tens injured. Hundreds more were arrested and later released on bail. The strike was called by the public transport operators, ride-hailing apps and truck drivers. They vowed to ground their vehicles, demanding better fuel prices.
They do not want to hear the citizen when we say that the petroleum diesel is too much for a common person in Kenya. And in a day when someone works, you do not know the amount of money in which they pocket. And when they raise the taxes, they do not see our pockets, they only see theirs.
We import our things through our own ports. Our neighboring country like Uganda, the fuel is cheap and they don't have ports. They import their fuels through Mombasa port. So we're asking this question, how come the fuel in Kenya is more expensive more than Uganda and Ethiopia and Tanzania? Those fuels, those prices, they are not matching.
Most of the people, they're depending on fuel. They're depending on diesel. And we can't do what we are doing today when the price of fuel is above. That's what people are in the road striking.
Then the government held out an olive branch to end the standoff, a 7-day strike suspension for talks.
The strike that is ongoing is suspended for a period of 1 week to provide an avenue for consultation, negotiation between the government and the stakeholders.
Shops had remained closed in Nairobi's central business district. Business owners were left counting losses after some of their premises were broken into. For Kenyans who are barely surviving, the protests are a red card on the government's responsiveness to their rising cost of living. The nation seems to have stepped back from the brink, at least for 7 days. But many Kenyans remain skeptical that the backroom negotiations will bear much fruit. There is public disappointment that commuters are having to pay more for their transport needs. For the operators, this could be a chance to negotiate better fuel prices at the pump. And today's apparent normalcy will be short-lived should the government and public transport stakeholders not find agreement within the week.
Right, Felix Maringa, my colleague there who filed that report, sat down with Ndindi Nyoro. He's a member of the Kenyan parliament. He was elected with the UDA ruling party, but has since broken ranks. Felix asked him, what are the reasons for the high cost of fuel in Kenya? As Nyoro earlier said, that it is not the crisis in the Middle East.
We have had crisis. There is something called scenario management, and also where you try to simulate what could happen to the economy at a particular point in time. And if you look at, for example, the year 2022, we had the same kind of disruption in supply chain of fuel. In fact, crude was more expensive then than now. But pump prices in Kenya were cheaper because there were interventions that were done. That is what needs to be done immediately, because the trade-off you'll have as an economy is to look forward into spending some retro money to safeguard the future, that is medium-term and long-term fundamentals of the economy, or then letting the economy run itself, and then you'll have so much to deal with. So I think in terms of interventions which I've given, one, what needs to be done is lowering VAT. In the meantime, the current 8% should go to around 0. We exempt VAT currently, at least in the intervening period. There is something called fuel levy here. That is money that is used for roads. And we need to hive off around 7 shillings from that levy. We need to reduce the margins for those people who are dealing in oil by around 4 shillings. And we also need an additional subsidy, especially for diesel, because diesel is very fundamental in the running of the economy. It's not just about transportation, it goes to production. So If we do all those things, we are likely to achieve medium-term and long-term stability of the economy.
Do you think the government is using overtaxation to cover for the opulence that we've seen with some of these government officials?
Precisely. Every expenditure that's public comes from the pockets of the people, in one way or the other. And it is through taxation and levies that the government raises revenue. What we need to understand as a country is that when you use money optimally, it brings about a condition of a virtuous cycle where everyone benefits. But when you spend money in not very prudent manner, then you end up being in a cycle. And that cycle, which is not very good, has led us not just to spending wrongly, but also to indebting the country, both in the current times, but also in the future. As we talk about all these other things, the debt in the country is climbing. Currently, our debt in Kenya is around 13 trillion Kenya shillings. Kenya is borrowing around 4 billion Kenya shillings every single day on net basis, without counting refinancing. This cannot go unabated for too long. We need to cut on that. We need to be more prudent. And of course, we need to be much more alive to the fact that the current spending should not hurt the future welfare of the people.
So what will be the ripple effect of all of this if the fuel prices do not change in the near future?
It is obvious, some of them we have seen it already. We have seen, of course, transport cost is now higher in Kenya by a huge margin. And when that happens, it means your pocket as a Kenyan gets raided. So you are reducing disposable income of the people at the macro scale. The second thing is that all the other consumables in Kenya, from foodstuffs, anything that passes through an industry anywhere, is likely interacting with diesel. So you are interacting with the higher input cost. And that higher input cost most of the time gets passed, of course, to the consumers. So we are likely to see the welfare of Kenyans getting hurt. We are likely to see disposable income getting decimated. And that spiral effect definitely at some point will flare up into a social scale.
So we've discussed the problems affecting citizens. What are some of the solutions that you could suggest?
There is both the short-term and the long-term solutions. The short-term for Kenya, one is to let importation of fuel be competitive so that the cost at which fuel lands in Kenya can be lower than what it is now. Currently it's single sourcing, and of course there are margins input there to benefit the political class. Secondly, in the intervening period, we have to caution the citizens of Africa by reducing taxes and levies across all our economies. Reason being, some of the decisions that the economy will take and the economic agents will take will be sticky in the long run. If you increase transportation costs, for example, fares, when fuel prices goes down after the geopolitics is settled, some of these things will be too sticky to come down. So it is therefore important that we realize that the disruption of supply chain is the farthest medium term, but in generality it will be short term. So we need to take decisions having that in mind. The other thing that we must do is the adoption of alternative ways of production and transport. It is time that we give an opportunity to electric vehicles. And in Kenya precisely, my recommendation would be, let's quote around 4 companies. We get a Chinese company, a Japanese one, an American one, and even a European one. We give them a status of special economic zone so that they come and set up base here in Kenya and to supply also to the region. Because in the long run, what has been perpetual, if you take the last 20 years, is that after every so many years, we'll have a reset of, and we'll have upheavals, and we'll have disruptions in the supply chain of fuel all the time. So what is it that we can do so that we free up our production and we free up very fundamental components of our economy from relying on fossils. That is also something that we have to do deliberately in the long term.